Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in this House today to provide some final words after almost 11 years in this place. I want to begin by acknowledging my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, as well as the many dedicated public servants and staffers with whom I have had the privilege to work during my time here. While I know there are some in all parties that cannot get past the at times partisan nature of politics, I have made many friends across the aisle during my time here, folks who are here to serve their constituents, their province, their country, but who can also be open to speaking to and even having fun with those of different perspectives. Honestly, the fact that many of us actually like each other as people across the aisle is something that Canadians should see more often. Je reconnais bien que beaucoup.
I recognize that many people have dedicated part of their professional lives to build a better Canada and a better world.
In this chamber, fortunate to have been allowed to play a role in shaping public policy in this country and internationally. It is a privilege that very few folks enjoy. Avant de parler des questions.
Before I address issues of policy and politics, I'd like to point out that in this place, we all give a lot, but we also receive a lot. One of the things that I am particularly grateful for is to have had the opportunity to speak the other official language of Canada. And although my French is far from perfect, this skill I have acquired is a great gift to me.
When I left the private sector to run for office, many in the business community thought I was mad. But it has been the most rewarding experience of my life. As an MP, as a minister at DFO, at Environment Canada, and at Natural Resources Canada, I have often said I had truly the best job in Canada. As MPs here, we know well the impact we can have on constituents' lives can at times be profound, but it can also be profoundly rewarding. I don't typically like to use the word proud, as those who've worked with me will know, but today I will. Over nearly 11 years in government, I am proud of several things that I, my team, departments, and government as a whole helped to accomplish. A few of the highlights: developing Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan, the Healthy Environment and Healthy Economy. The first plan in Canadian history to show in detail not only how you could achieve a climate target, but how you could exceed one. Launching Canada's first critical mineral strategy and the investment tax credit regime to advance clean energy development. Establishing what I believe will be transformational in this country, the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. Catalyzing the full modernization of Canada's aging Coast Guard fleet. Creating the BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund to address the decline of wild Pacific salmon, which is a critical issue in British Columbia. And expanding marine protected areas from 1% to over 14% during my time as Mr. Official. Everyone in this room will have heard many times people asking why they should engage in the political process, often saying that individuals cannot make a difference. And that attitude is particularly prominent these days with young people. But I would tell you that in my experience, that is simply not true. I entered politics over a decade ago to tackle climate change in a way that creates economic opportunity and is not simply about sacrifice. And over that time, working alongside colleagues, I've had the chance to make meaningful and, I believe, lasting contributions to climate policy that builds a strong future economy.
Hear, hear.
Individuals can make a difference through their words and through their actions. It is a message I often share with young people, whether in schools, through my youth council, or in communities across the country, many of whom presently feel the system doesn't work for them. On the climate issue that brought me into politics, while today's geopolitical climate may suggest that progress has slowed, I remain optimistic that Canada, Europe, and the world will meet this challenge. Le changement climatique ne disparaît.
Climate change will not disappear. It's a scientific reality with human and economic impacts that are growing every year.
Major challenge, but addressing it and building a strong economy for the future can, and indeed must, go hand in hand. Looking at actual global trends rather than simply rhetoric, it is clear that the world is moving to a lower carbon future and that many countries China in particular, have explicit economic strategies to accelerate the energy transition. Progress is being made, albeit more slowly than science suggests we need. Growth in energy-related CO2 emissions is continuing to decouple from global economic growth. And very importantly, increasingly, climate progress is not simply being driven by government policy, it is being driven by technology. Simply put, many low-carbon energy technologies are now cheaper, and they're often much better than conventional alternatives. And this is something we should all celebrate. Climate change and its impacts are a matter of science, not politics, but how we choose to respond remains a fundamentally political decision, one that requires foresight, thoughtfulness, and courage. The past 11 years have been enormously rewarding, and I am grateful for the opportunity to continue serving this country in a new capacity, as the Prime Minister has asked me to take on the role of Canada's ambassador to the European Union. J'ai accepté ce rôle pour la même.
I accepted this position for the same reasons that I entered into politics. A commitment to Canada and the conviction that here is where I can contribute the best at this moment.
The Prime Minister has an ambitious vision for what this partnership can become, and my role will be to help implement that vision and ensure it delivers concrete results for all parties. I love this country more than I can fully express. Canada is the best country in the world, not because we are perfect, but because we face our flaws and choose again and again to do better. Ours is a story of resilience, of expanding rights, of building a more inclusive and just society. Whether that story continues is up to us. Our willingness to stand up for what we believe in, to defend democracy, advance reconciliation, confront climate change, and build an economy that works for everyone. Serving as a member of Parliament and a minister has been the privilege of my life. Serving in this new role will be a different kind of privilege, one that I approach with the same sense of duty and determination. I would conclude by waxing a little bit philosophical. I think most of my staff that are here will probably find that funny. I believe that we are capable as a species of enlightened self-interest, and in this regard, acting on climate change is firmly in our collective self-interest. But I also believe that many of us are also very much capable of altruism, of thinking not only about how building a better community or helping those less fortunate may benefit us in the longer term, but actually about how we are morally obligated in the direction of social justice. To all here and outside this place, I say that we can indeed work to build a better and more just world if only we have the courage and the will to try. And in this vein, I would conclude by quoting the words of William Blake taken from his poem Jerusalem. And here I freely admit I took these lines from the conclusion of speeches from the great Tommy Douglas. But as a Saskatchewanian originally, and as someone who actually watched him in person and met him as a young person, I think Tommy would think that's just fine. These lines, I think, capture the essence of a commitment to community and to public service, which is, I believe, about striving each and every day to make this country and this world a better place in which to live. Blake wrote, and I quote, "I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land." Ce fut un plaisir et un honneur.
It's been both a pleasure and an honor for me to know you and to work with all of you.
And my honor to know and to work with all of you, and I look forward to seeing many of you in Brussels. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I believe it is the Honourable Member for Okanagan Lake West, South Kelowna, who will be speaking.
Today, to note the departure of the Honourable Member for North Vancouver, Capilano, who will be leaving this place to serve Canada abroad in a new capacity. Now, Mr. Speaker, the member and I have spent a good deal of time on opposite sides of some very important debates on net zero legislation, on the 2 billion trees initiative, and on broader conservative concerns about the government's environmental approach. Now, those disagreements were real. I stand by them, just as I'm sure the honourable member stands by his. Now, while most of those exchanges were during his time as the Minister of the Environment and Minister of Natural Resources, I also do want to thank him for his service as the Minister of Fisheries. In particular, I know that he cared much in that role about salmon policy, and it's always welcome, as I've said many times, to have another British Columbian voice in Ottawa, particularly in a position of authority. Now, in fact, when it comes to the debates we had, I suspect we may both continue to believe that we were on the right side of those debates. Perhaps the only fair way that we can resolve that, Mr. Speaker, is that we compare notes in the years ahead, say 2030, maybe again in 2050, when the results of those policies are clear. But what is worth noting is that even though through those disagreements, we never lost the ability to have a conversation, whether it was in the House, at committee, or at the parliamentary gym, or even when we found ourselves seated next to each other on a long flight. There was always professionalism and mutual respect. As a fellow British Columbian, I can also attest to the travel and the demands that come along with representing a riding on the West Coast. It is not always an easy schedule. I recall mentioning to the member at the gym that perhaps in his new role, he might finally find himself ahead of events happening in Ottawa rather than living life feeling 3 hours behind. Now, I recall one moment during COVID at committee where I yielded my time, and of course, Mr. Speaker, you would know that opposition, we never have tricks for ministers when they show up at committee. But when I yielded my time to the member for Saanich Gulf Islands to question the minister on his net zero bill, in that instant, Mr. Speaker, a minister's staffer flung into action, diving onto the desk, pulling one book out and somehow switching it with a completely different book. It was a small moment, but again, it allowed him to switch the answers from the perspective of a Conservative to a Green Member of Parliament. Now, it may have been a small moment, but it reflected not only the preparation, but also the strength of the people that we count on. Mr. Speaker, moments like this remind us that none of us do this work alone. We often rely on dedicated staff who work behind the scenes, often under pressure, to help us perform our duties as elected officials as ably as possible. They may not all often be recognized, but they should be, and we should thank them not just today, but I believe every day. Mr. Speaker, there comes a time when many who serve here look for new ways to continue contributing. Canadians have been well served by former parliamentarians at the federal and provincial level who have stepped into roles abroad. It was Prime Minister Harper who began appointing experienced political leaders such as Gary Dewar, followed by Gordon Campbell. Prime Minister Trudeau continued this practice with Stéphane Dion and John Horgan of British Columbia. These individuals said yes to continuing to serve, to putting their years of insight and experience to work for Canada in a new way. I suspect having a Prime Minister make that personal call helps in one's decision-making. And I would just point out before I finish, there are many experienced parliamentarians who have since left active political life whose insight and perspective could likewise be drawn upon. And on that basis, Mr. Speaker, I wish to the honourable member for Vancouver, North Vancouver, Capilano well. While I've said we've disagreed, I respect his willingness to serve. I have no doubt he will continue to do so in his next role. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable.
The honourable member for Jonquière. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It truly is a pleasure for me today, Mr. Speaker, to discuss the trajectory followed by the honourable member. I think I will call him Jonathan, even though that may slightly sidestep the rules. Mr. Speaker, I was trying to see today what I might find online. And apparently we did both political science and philosophy in university, apparently. And colleagues have said he was Minister of Fisheries, Minister of the Environment, Natural Resources Minister. That's in that position, in that capacity that I knew him. But in the 1990s, I found out that he was with Mr. Romano on constitutional negotiations, federal provincial. That's Roy Romano. But for a Quebecer, Roy Romano is kind of like a bad word. You can't really fault anyone for it. I have to say, I worked with a member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie in the private sector, so you can't help it sometimes. One thing I'd like to say is nonpartisanship. Oftentimes in the House of Commons, there can be some tough debates, and aside from the answers on the carbon tax, in general, I would say my friend Jonathan would answer the questions that had been put to him. And this lack of partisanship is something that I've also noted in the work we did with him, and it is thanks to him that we were able to have phosphate on the list of critical minerals in my region. That was a critical aspect. There's also the idea of building green homes. Some failures there. But he was also very open to help colleagues, even on the opposition side. The 2 billion trees program that was less successful, shall we say, but that he always defended, again, fairly. I don't think there's any harm in being proud of the works that he's done for the environment. For many people within groups, he was an example. Even though there had been efforts to downplay his credibility, it was actually unsuccessful, which means that my friend Jonathan had a strong reputation within environmental groups. I also wondered, when people refer to zero-emission vehicles, I wondered if anyone ever had a hydrogen-powered vehicle. Jonathan is the only person I know in Canada who does have a hydrogen-fueled vehicle. And I want to thank him for a trip we took to Berlin, where we met with the representatives from Siemens. And there were people from Siemens who thought I was a part of the government. So they would speak frankly to Jonathan about sequestration and capture and storage for hydrogen idea. Jonathan showed true nonpartisanship. I want to thank him for this trust he had in me. In his speech, he really did mention that he had learned French. He did really learn French in the context of his time in office, and I think it's really honorable. And I'd like to get back to one comment. Once Jonathan asked me, actually he asked his assistant, Kyle, why I was speaking to him in English, whereas I would speak to French. I would speak to Jonathan in French. I would say it's a sign of respect, actually. I'll explain why I'll speak French to a minister. Often when you're not speaking your own language, there might be some nuances that you don't capture. For instance, I'll give him an example. When I found out that he would probably be appointed ambassador, we had a discussion, and I asked him what his wife thought about it, whether she was going to quit her job, follow him. He said, yes, because my love is open to new adventures, except for the fact that having adventures in French has another connotation. It doesn't necessarily mean the same thing at all. And that is why I tend to speak my mother tongue. My father always says two things. My father would always tell me, don't trust anyone who doesn't drink, but trust a guy who laughs frankly. Jonathan has always laughed broadly, and I think that is something that shows that he's quite a friendly person. And I'll close in saying this, Mr. Speaker. My colleague, the member for Lac-Saint-Jean, and myself hope that we can get there's a spare bedroom over there in Brussels. We were joking around about that.
québécois, je lui souhaite le
On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I wish him the very best in his new position. Thank you.
The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a genuine privilege to pay tribute to the honourable member from North Vancouver, Capilano, on behalf of Canada's New Democrats, and to wish him well on his upcoming post as Canada's ambassador to the European Union. I was told I had a minute and a half to say what needed to be said, and I find myself with a little bit more time. So I'm going to use that time because there's much that can be said about this member. He has always brought intelligence, collegiality, and dedication to service to this place. As a cabinet minister with several critical portfolios, he has made significant contributions to our nation. His voracious reading, attention to detail, and commitment to hard work are now the stuff of legend. He centered much of his efforts on preparing Canada for a sustainable future. We know that through his efforts, we have made profound progress on salmon conservation and plastic pollution. In fact, the largest investment in Canadian history in salmon preservation was done because of his efforts. The House, in their wisdom, has already anticipated my next line, which is, I applaud him for his vision and passion in this regard. As BC members of Parliament, I can say for us that we deeply appreciate the positive impact that he has had, in particular on our province and our coasts. Mr. Speaker, I think the very best that can be said about any elected representative is that they made a difference. Well, the honourable member has certainly done that here in spades. We wish him all the best in his new duties, filling a critical role that will benefit greatly from his skills and talents. I know that he will make a difference in Brussels and do Canada proud. As he does so, I urge him to hearken back to his early days as a Saskatchewan young New Democrat. Yes. An excellent pedigree, and in times of doubt or difficulty, never hesitate to ask, what would Tommy Douglas have done? Thank you for your service. Thank you for the member's service, and we wish him all the best.
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my honourable colleague, North Vancouver, Capilano, it is bittersweet to see him leave this place. The only sweet part is knowing that he'll be representing Canada so well as our ambassador to the European Union, a jurisdiction that hasn't forgotten climate change. I was earlier today meeting with a colleague from the German Greens who serves as a member of the European Parliament and was describing to me what it was like to work in Brussels and Strasbourg and back and forth. And she thought it was a long trip. I explained what it was like to be a British Columbia member of Parliament in this place. But anyway, she's from Hanover. You may run into her someday. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member may run into her someday. I must still speak through the Speaker. But to my honourable colleague and friend from North Vancouver, Capilano, we've become friends. I don't think we started out that way, but and it was one of my favorite moments in any committee meeting when the honourable member from I always want to say Nicola, and it's changed writing name. Anyway, our honourable colleague who gave me his time at the beginning of the Environment Committee. It was a choice moment, and it doesn't happen very often. But you were able to, you didn't really need a briefing book either way. I'll just say that. You're one of the ministers in this place who is not in need of someone telling you what the facts are, or telling him what to say. Unnecessary. But in reviewing, of course, all the years that you've served in this place, first under, primarily under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, as Minister of Fisheries and Environment and Climate Change and Energy and Natural Resources, anyone here will know that we hardly ever cross paths. In other words, pretty constantly. And the work that the honourable member did on fisheries, and as Rambo from Vancouver Kingsway has pointed out, the work to ban single-use plastics and get them out of our oceans, the work, as has been mentioned, for wild salmon, the work on carbon pricing, the work to move to a post-carbon economy. These lessons and the hard fights that you had must not be lost. So I'll turn to just to say, as from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And to say that and I'll say this, voicing perhaps your child Max perhaps might say, when you get to Brussels, change Canada's position and make ecocide a crime under the International Criminal Court provisions of, yes, well, that's just something to take away with you. No one asked me to say that. And additionally, I would say to the honourable member for North Vancouver, Capilano, as he leaves here, we are always in the right to remember one of the greatest Canadian parliamentarians ever, in Tommy Douglas. The fact that the honourable member was able to be brought into cabinet to represent Saskatchewan while the Vancouver MP is one of those things that we know will define him as a great Canadian to represent Canada to the EU. And just remember other lines that I recall about the William Blake's Jerusalem, which I also love, is not that the sword sleep in my hand and this green land, but remember how William Blake described industry, the dark satanic mills. So continue the good work to the honourable member. We look forward to seeing you at home in Canada, and in the meantime, hope to be able to come now and then to Brussels. Thank you so much for your service. There aren't enough words to thank you.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I would also like to say how much I appreciated working with the minister. I've always appreciated his intelligence and the fact that he was always accessible when we wanted to know more about a certain question to do with his portfolio. Personally, I wish him the best of successes representing Canada on the international scene.
The honourable member for Burnaby North Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for North Vancouver Capilano will be deeply and profoundly missed in this House, on the North Shore, in BC, and across Canada. We were nominated as neighbours within weeks of each other, and for more than 12 years, I've had the pleasure to watch his impact on our community and our country. And the only solace I have is that Europe and the world and Canada get to continue to benefit from His Excellency's new position. He didn't do this alone. Jonathan is notorious for surrounding himself with the best people, and I thought he might want to take this opportunity to acknowledge some of the great Canadians that he's had the opportunity to work with over the years.
Honourable member.
That's very nice, and it does give me an opportunity just to say a few thank yous. I would start with the dedicated public servants who worked with me in various departments, and in particular the deputy ministers who honestly were all excellent, excellent folks. Catherine Blewett at Fisheries, Stephen Lucas, John Moffat, Chris Hogan at Environment Canada, J.F. Tremblay, John Hannaford, Molly Johnson, Michael Vandergrift, Jeff Labonte at Natural Resources Canada. Canada should be very comforted and proud that we have such amazing public servants. My constituency staff, who I often said, no offense to the other members in this place, but they ran one of the best constituency offices in the country. Certainly the director who has been long serving there, Cynthia Bunbury. The many volunteers in my riding, in particular Duncan Frostick and Kevin Evans, who were great sources of guidance for me. And of course, the folks who worked in my offices here in Ottawa, the chiefs of staff that I've had, Marlo Reynolds, Claire Seaborn, Alexis McIntyre, Kyle Harrietta, and a whole range of amazing staff, many of whom have chosen to be here today. Laura Mitchell, who's been with me for 10 years. A number of other folks that came with me from North Vancouver, Richard, Kieran, Sandy, who ran all of Atlantic Canada for me very ably, and Aaron Flanagan. I'm not missing somebody, Sabrina Kim, who sometimes drove me crazy, but she was one of the best communications directors I had. You know, it's because of folks like that we're able to actually do our jobs in this place, and I was very fortunate to have amazingly dedicated, talented people. So, thank you.
Okay.